Hey there, sci-fi lovers. Welcome to our channel, where the universe unfolds and the impossible becomes real. If you're as passionate about the unknown as we are, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us create more mind-bending adventures just for you.
Lunar Dark Commander Alex O'Neill had dreamed of this moment for as long as he could remember. Standing in the cramped confines of the lunar lander, he peered out the small viewport, the vast and desolate surface of the moon filling his vision. But the triumph of their mission quickly soured. What should have been a routine landing had turned into a nightmare. The lander, inexplicably off course, careened toward the moon's surface at an alarming speed, alarms blaring as the autopilot struggled to compensate. "Brace for impact!" Alex shouted over the comms, his voice tense but controlled. His crew, seasoned veterans of space exploration, did as they were trained, securing themselves as best they could in the final seconds before the inevitable. The crash was deafening, metal screeching and tearing as the lander skidded across the moon's surface, finally coming to a jarring halt. Silence followed, thick and oppressive. Alex struggled against his harness, his body aching from the rough landing. "Everyone report," he ordered, but his voice was met with static. "Damn it," he muttered, reaching for the manual release on his harness. The straps fell away and he staggered to his feet, his limbs heavy from the crash. The interior of the lander was a mess of twisted metal and shattered equipment. He moved quickly, checking on his crew, but one look at their lifeless bodies confirmed what he already feared. They were gone, each one lost in the crash that he had somehow survived. For a moment, Alex stood there, grappling with the crushing reality. But he was a commander, and he had a mission. He forced himself to move, to think. The moon's surface was harsh, but he needed to get out, assess the situation, and find a way to survive. His hands shook as he donned his helmet and sealed his suit. The lander's hatch was jammed, but a few solid kicks dislodged it, and it swung open with a groan of protest. Stepping out onto the moon's surface, Alex was struck by the eerie silence, the vast emptiness that stretched out before him, bathed in the stark light of the distant sun. He was alone, the last survivor of a mission that had gone disastrously wrong. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He activated the suit's comms system, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, might hear him. "This is Commander Alex O'Neill of the Artemis 4 mission. The lander has crashed and I'm the sole survivor. If anyone can hear this, please respond." Static. He tried again, adjusting frequencies, repeating his message. Still nothing. The reality of his situation settled heavily on his shoulders, but Alex knew he couldn't afford to panic. His oxygen supply was limited, and without communication, his chances of rescue were slim. The nearest base was over 50 kilometers away, a trek that would take days, but Alex was nothing if not determined. He gathered what supplies he could carry, a small oxygen tank, emergency rations, and a flashlight, before setting off. The moon was an alien world, its surface covered in fine, gray dust that kicked up with each step. The landscape was dotted with craters and jagged rocks, and as he walked, the silence became oppressive, broken only by the soft crunch of his boots on the lunar soil. Hours passed, the sun casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. Alex was starting to feel the effects of the crash and the exhaustion of his journey, but he pressed on. He needed to reach the base. It was his only hope. Then he saw something strange. At first, it was just a shadow in the corner of his vision, something moving at the edge of a nearby crater. Alex stopped, turning slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He stared into the darkness, the crater's edge obscured by shadows. He activated his flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. There, just beyond the crater's lip, something shifted, a shape too large to be just a rock or a trick of the light. "Who's there?" Alex called out, his voice echoing in the emptiness. The shape moved again, and Alex's breath caught in his throat as he realized it wasn't a shadow. It was something alive. He backed away, his flashlight still trained on the thing. It was hard to make out details, but he could see that it was large, larger than any known lunar creature. It moved with a strange, unnatural fluidity, its form shifting and undulating as it crept closer. Alex's mind raced. There was nothing in the mission briefings about life on the moon, no reports, no warnings. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't supposed to be here. And yet, here it was, a dark, shifting mass of something alien. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice trembling. "I don't want to hurt you." But the creature didn't stop. It continued to approach, its movements growing more deliberate, more focused. Alex could feel the panic rising in his chest, the overwhelming sense of dread that came with the realization that he was truly alone, outmatched, and far from home. He turned and ran, his heart hammering in his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The creature followed, its strange, slithering movements making it impossible to gauge how fast it was. Alex didn't look back. He couldn't. He just kept running, his legs burning with exertion, his mind racing with fear and confusion. This wasn't supposed to happen. The mission was supposed to be routine. A simple landing, a few days on the surface, and then back to Earth. But now, everything had gone wrong, and he was alone, being hunted by something he couldn't even comprehend. He stumbled, nearly falling, but managed to catch himself. The creature was close. He could feel it. His instincts screamed at him to keep moving, to not look back. But something in him snapped, and he turned, raising the flashlight. The beam caught the creature full on, and for a moment, Alex could see it clearly. It was like nothing he had ever seen, a mass of writhing tendrils, each one glistening with some sort of dark, viscous fluid. Its body was a shifting, amorphous shape, constantly changing and reforming as it moved. And it was fast. Too fast. Alex barely had time to react before it was on him, one of its tendrils lashing out, knocking him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, the air rushing from his lungs as the creature loomed over him, its mass descending, engulfing him in darkness. He fought, kicking and thrashing, but it was like trying to fight smoke. The creature's tendrils wrapped around him, constricting, tightening, crushing. His vision blurred, his oxygen tank hissing as the pressure increased, the suit's alarms blaring in his ears. But even as the darkness closed in, a strange calm settled over Alex. This was it. The end. He had fought as best he could, but there was no escaping this. The moon had claimed him, just as it had claimed his crew. But then, just as suddenly as it had attacked, the creature released him. Alex gasped, choking on the thin lunar air as he struggled to sit up, his head spinning. The creature was gone, retreating back into the shadows, leaving him alone once more. He didn't wait to see where it had gone. He forced himself to his feet, his body screaming in protest, and started running again. The base was close. He had to be close. He could make it. He had to make it. His vision was tunneling, his lungs burning with each breath. But he kept moving, driven by sheer willpower and the primal need to survive. The terrain blurred around him, the craters and rocks blending together as he ran, his mind focused on one thing: reaching the base. And then, finally, he saw it. A small structure in the distance, barely visible against the gray landscape. He stumbled, nearly falling, but pushed himself forward, his body running on empty. The base was just ahead. He could see the airlock, the promise of safety and sanctuary. He reached it, slamming his fist against the control panel, praying that it still worked. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Alex staggered inside, collapsing against the wall as the door sealed shut behind him. He ripped off his helmet, gasping for air, his entire body trembling with exhaustion and relief. He had made it. He was alive. But as he sat there, struggling to catch his breath, he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that still clung to him. The creature was still out there, somewhere on the moon, lurking in the shadows. And he was still alone. Part 2. In the shadows. The base was a small, self-sustaining habitat, designed for short-term missions. It had been set up years ago during the first wave of lunar exploration, a temporary outpost for scientists and astronauts studying the moon. Now, it was abandoned, a relic of a bygone era. Alex made his way through the narrow corridors, his flashlight flickering as he passed darkened rooms and empty workstations. The base was eerily silent, the only sound his labored breathing and the soft hum of the life support systems. He found the control room, a small, cramped space filled with outdated equipment. The main console flickered to life as he powered it on, and he quickly began scanning for any signs of communication. But the systems were old, the technology outdated. The base had been out of commission for years, and any connection to Earth had long since been severed. Alex's hopes of contacting home faded as he realized that he was well and truly cut off. He slumped into the chair, exhaustion washing over him. He had made it to the base, but now what? There was no way to call for help, no way to let anyone know what had happened. He was stranded, alone on the moon with limited supplies and no means of escape. His thoughts drifted back to the creature, the thing that had attacked him. What was it? Where had it come from? There were no records of any life forms on the moon, nothing like what he had encountered. And yet, it was real. He had seen it, felt it. The memory sent a shiver down his spine, and he instinctively reached for his helmet, ready to put it back on, as if that would somehow protect him. But he stopped, realizing how futile it was. If the creature wanted to get in, a helmet wouldn't stop it. Alex forced himself to focus. He couldn't afford to panic, not now. He needed to think, to plan. There had to be a way out of this. The base had a small rover, he remembered. It wasn't much, but it could get him further than walking. He pulled up the base's layout on the console, locating the garage where the rover was stored. It wasn't far, a few rooms down the corridor. He could make it. He just needed to gather his strength. As he sat there, gathering his thoughts, the silence of the base began to weigh on him. It was too quiet, the kind of silence that made every small noise, every creak, every breath, seem amplified. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something was lurking just out of sight, waiting. He shook his head, trying to dispel the paranoia. He was alone. The creature was outside, not in here. He was safe. But the feeling wouldn't go away, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Finally, he forced himself to his feet, gripping the flashlight tightly as he made his way to the garage. The base was small, but the corridors seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness pressing in on all sides. When he reached the garage, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The rover was there, a small, sturdy vehicle designed for short trips across the lunar surface. It wasn't much, but it was his best shot at getting out of here. He quickly checked the rover's systems, relieved to find that it was still operational. The battery was low, but it had enough power for a few hours of travel. It would have to be enough. As he prepared to leave, something caught his eye. In the corner of the garage, partially obscured by shadows, was a storage locker. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, dust covering its surface. But something about it drew him in, a nagging curiosity that he couldn't ignore. He approached the locker, his hand hovering over the latch. For a moment, he hesitated, a sense of foreboding creeping over him. But he pushed it aside, telling himself that it was just a locker, nothing more. The latch gave way with a creak, and the door swung open, revealing a small compartment filled with old supplies and equipment. But there, in the center, was something that made Alex's blood run cold. It was a jar, sealed and airtight, with something floating inside. At first he thought it was some kind of sample, perhaps a rock or mineral. But as he looked closer, he realized with horror that it wasn't a rock. It was a piece of the creature. A small, writhing mass of tendrils preserved in some kind of fluid. Even in the jar it moved, as if alive, its tendrils brushing against the glass. Alex stumbled back, his heart racing. The creature had been here before. Someone had found it, studied it, and kept a piece of it. But why? And how had it ended up out there, roaming the lunar surface? His mind raced with questions, but there were no answers. Only the cold, hard reality that he was alone, with no way to escape and no one to help him. But as he stared at the jar, a new thought began to form in his mind. This creature, whatever it was, had survived on the moon for who knows how long. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also resilient. If he could understand it, maybe he could find a way to survive too. With a newfound determination, Alex grabbed the jar, shoving it into his pack before climbing into the rover. He powered it up, the hum of the engine breaking the silence, and steered it toward the garage door. The door creaked open, revealing the barren lunar landscape beyond. Alex took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He had a long journey ahead of him, but he wasn't going to give up. Not yet. As the rover rolled out onto the lunar surface, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still out there, watching him. But this time, he was ready. This time, he wasn't going to run. Part 3. The Labyrinth. The rover bumped and jolted over the uneven lunar surface, its wheels kicking up clouds of fine gray dust. Alex kept a tight grip on the controls, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of the creature. The jar in his pack seemed to pulse with a faint, almost imperceptible energy, a constant reminder of the alien life form that was now a part of his mission. He had a plan, though it was barely more than a desperate idea. If he could reach the old research outpost on the far side of the crater, there might be a chance to analyze the creature's sample, to understand its biology, and maybe find a way to fight back. But the journey was perilous. The lunar terrain was treacherous, and the rover's battery was draining faster than he had anticipated. The thought of being stranded out here, alone and vulnerable, gnawed at the edges of his mind, but he pushed it aside. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to let fear stop him now. Hours passed, the landscape blurring into a monotonous expanse of gray and black. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the surface. Alex could feel the weight of exhaustion bearing down on him, but he forced himself to stay focused. Then, just as he began to wonder if he had taken a wrong turn, he saw it. A dark shape on the horizon, standing out against the barren landscape. It was the research outpost, a small, squat structure nestled in the shadow of a massive crater. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. As he approached the outpost, something caught his eye. A movement in the shadows, a flicker of something dark and sinuous. The creature. It was there, lurking near the entrance, its form barely visible against the darkened landscape. Alex's heart raced as he brought the rover to a stop, his mind racing for a plan. He couldn't fight it. Not directly. But maybe, just maybe, he could outsmart it. He reached into his pack, pulling out the jar. The creature inside pulsed, its tendrils brushing against the glass as if sensing his presence. Alex stared at it, his mind working furiously. The creature was intelligent. He could see that now. It had attacked him with purpose, but it had also retreated, as if it understood the danger of killing him too soon. What if it wanted something? What if it needed something? An idea began to form in his mind, risky and reckless, but it was all he had. He carefully opened the jar, the seal hissing as it broke. The tendrils inside writhed, as if aware of their impending freedom. Holding the jar out in front of him, Alex slowly exited the rover, his movements deliberate and slow. The creature near the outpost stirred, its form shifting in the shadows, watching him. "Come on," Alex whispered to himself, taking a step forward. The jar pulsed in his hand, the tendrils inside straining against the glass. The creature in the shadows moved closer, its dark mass undulating as it approached. Alex held his breath, every muscle in his body tensed. He was close now, only a few meters from the entrance to the outpost. The creature was only a few feet away, its tendrils reaching out toward him, drawn to the sample in his hand. With a sudden fluid motion, Alex threw the jar as hard as he could, aiming for a spot beyond the creature. The jar sailed through the air, spinning end over end before smashing into the ground a few meters away. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the creature turned, its tendrils lashing out toward the broken jar. Alex didn't wait to see more. He bolted for the entrance, his boots kicking up dust as he sprinted across the surface. He reached the airlock, slamming his fist against the control panel. The door hissed open, and he dove inside. The door creaked open, revealing the bar sealing shut behind him, just as the creature lunged for him. Inside the outpost, Alex collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. The creature pounded against the door, its tendrils scraping against the metal, but it held firm. He was safe, at least for now. But he knew it was only a matter of time before the creature found another way in. He needed to act quickly if he was going to survive. He pulled himself to his feet, his body screaming in protest, and made his way deeper into the outpost. The lab was small and outdated, but it still had some functional equipment. He powered up the consoles, quickly setting to work analyzing the creature's sample. As the data began to stream in, Alex felt a flicker of hope. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its biology was a complex web of unknown proteins and enzymes, capable of rapid regeneration and adaptation. But it had a weakness, something in its structure that could be exploited. A plan began to take shape in his mind, but it was risky. He would need to synthesize a compound using the limited resources in the lab, something that could disrupt the creature's regenerative abilities, weakening it enough for him to escape. He worked quickly, his hands shaking with exhaustion and fear. Outside, the creature continued to batter against the door, its relentless assault growing more desperate as it sensed its prey slipping away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the compound was ready. Alex loaded it into a makeshift injector, his heart pounding as he prepared to face the creature once more. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come, and opened the airlock. Part 4. The Last Stand. The creature was waiting for him, its massive form blocking the entrance to the outpost. Alex could see the hunger in its movements, the desperation in its tendrils as they reached out toward him. But this time he wasn't afraid. This time, he had a weapon. He raised the injector, aiming for the creature's center mass. The creature hesitated, sensing the change in him, but it was too late. Alex fired, the injector launching the compound into the creature's body. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the creature let out a sound, a high-pitched, keening wail that echoed across the lunar landscape. Its body convulsed, its tendrils writhing in agony as the compound began to take effect. Alex watched, a mix of horror and fascination, as the creature's form began to break down, its structure unraveling like a loose thread. It tried to retreat, to escape, but it was too late. The compound was doing its work, destroying the creature from the inside out. Within minutes, it was over. The creature collapsed, its body dissolving into a dark, viscous puddle on the ground. The lunar surface was silent once more. Alex let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had done it. He had survived. But the victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the loss of his crew and the knowledge that he was still stranded on this barren, hostile world. He made his way back into the outpost, his mind numb with exhaustion. There was still so much to do, so much to figure out. But for now, he needed rest. He needed to regroup, to gather his strength for whatever came next. As he lay down on the cold, hard floor, the silence of the moon pressing in on him, Alex allowed himself to drift into a restless sleep. The image of the creature's final moments burned into his mind. He had survived the night, but the true challenge was just beginning. Part 5. Alone in the Dark. When Alex awoke, the outpost was still and silent. For a moment he lay there, disoriented, the events of the previous day blurring together in his mind. But as the memories came rushing back, he sat up, his body stiff and sore from the ordeal. He was alone, truly alone now. The creature was gone, but so were his chances of rescue. The base's communication systems were beyond repair, and his supplies were dwindling. But Alex wasn't ready to give up. He was a survivor, and he would find a way off this rock, one way or another. He spent the next few days exploring the outpost, gathering what little resources he could find. There was enough food and water to last a few weeks, but after that, he would need to find a way to replenish his supplies. The days stretched into weeks, and Alex fell into a routine, maintaining the outpost, scavenging for anything useful, and keeping himself occupied with small tasks. But the isolation weighed on him, the silence of the moon gnawing at his sanity. He found himself talking to the walls, to the empty rooms, anything to break the oppressive silence. But the loneliness was always there, a constant companion, reminding him that he was the last man on the moon. One day, as he was rummaging through an old storage locker, he found something that made his heart skip a beat. A small dusty box with the NASA logo stamped on it. Inside was a flare gun, a last-ditch emergency signal meant for dire situations. He stared at it, his mind racing. The odds of anyone seeing it were slim. No, almost impossible. But it was something, a glimmer of hope in the endless darkness. He took the flare gun outside, the cold lunar air biting at his skin. The moon was as barren as ever, the landscape stretching out before him in an endless expanse of gray and black. He hesitated, the flare gun heavy in his hands. Was it worth it? Was there any point? But then he remembered his crew, the faces of the men and women who had died in the crash, and he knew he couldn't give up. He owed it to them to keep fighting, to keep hoping. With a deep breath, he aimed the flare gun at the sky and pulled the trigger. The flare shot up into the air, a bright, burning beacon of hope against the blackness of space. Alex watched it climb higher and higher until it was just a distant speck, lost in the vastness of the universe. And then, the silence returned. Alex stood there, staring up at the sky, waiting. But there was nothing, no response, no sign that anyone had seen his signal. The moon remained silent, indifferent to his plight. He lowered the flare gun, a deep sense of despair settling over him. He was alone, truly, utterly alone. But even in the face of that crushing reality, Alex refused to give up. He turned and made his way back to the outpost, the flare gun still clutched in his hand. He would survive. He would find a way. Because even in the darkest depths of space, where no one could hear him scream, Alex O'Neill was not ready to die. He was the last man on the moon, and he would fight until his last breath.
Thank you so much for joining us on this cosmic journey. If you enjoyed the ride, please hit that subscribe button and share the adventure with others. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more incredible stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the stars.